everyone, Brian Beeler coming to you with another podcast. This time we're live remote in Dallas, Texas, of all places. So great to be out. Great to be here with Jed Ayres, CEO of IGEL. You guys are out doing live events and kicking some ass, if I don't
Can you believe it? It's been a wild week. Three in 1 week. Actually, we did four. One was in Switzerland. Didn't go to that one.
So where have you been this week?
I started the week in Charlotte. Well, I live in San Francisco, so
right.
I flew through Denver to Charlotte. We had a great event in Charlotte, beautiful Charlotte. Mm-hmm. It seems to be booming. And then we went from there to Chicago, downtown Chicago yesterday, and now we're here at the beautiful Adolphus Hotel.
This hotel is actually pretty fantastic. I haven't been here before. The historic buildings are pretty sweet, aren't they?
They are. They've done a nice job restoring it.
So you're out with partners, you're out doing stuff, which is somewhat unique. You made the comment before we got started that this is the first time out for a lot of your customers and probably some of your partners too. What is it that makes you guys so brave to go out and do this?
We think there's kind of a first mover advantage in terms of getting out, backing out in front of people. When I sort of query a lot of our customers that are in these events, because I want to ask them, like, how did you find out about IGEL, right? Almost always it's a live event that they met up with IGEL, whether it's Citrix Synergy or a user group somewhere in the country. So, I think we've been feeding off of a lot of our install base as they expanded, and we've been doing really well with that as people really leaned into the technology through COVID. So it feels like, hey, we need to get back out and start meeting up with customers again. And then also just the magic that happens in a room when you have partners there, not only our technical partners, there's 19 of them that signed up for this, including Amazon, Citrix, Microsoft, and VMware, which should be a statement of what IGEL is doing all by itself. But yeah, having our reseller partners, our distributor partners, and our customers all in the same room.
You can't beat the in-person environment. And even just this conversation, like we could do this on Zoom, but there's still that just a little bit of disconnect in being able to read the person and have that conversation and look across the table.
I mean, I think we're all numbed out on Zoom, and it's just there's no, and of course after the events we're taking customers to meals, and I can tell you there's like the renewed enthusiasm, and people are like, sort of don't take it for granted when you're sitting in this beautiful restaurant sharing a meal with each other. I mean,
know.
we I think got in a rhythm where we took that for granted. And people are realizing, okay, this is pretty special to be back around humans again, and lots of toasts and lots of good friendships and partnerships, either rekindled or starting again.
Well, the airports are busy. I mean, you've been in 4 in 3 days.
Yes.
I hit a couple yesterday on my way down here. It feels like people are out and moving around.
Definitely.
But you guys, so first mover advantage you talk about, and IGEL. I mean, I think we think of the general IT landscape as kind of a small company. You're not, I understand, but it's, when you look at your partners of AWS and Veeam and Citrix and some of the biggest titans of the industry, to be alongside there and to be at these events demoing or talking tech, demoing tech, working with partners, it's really cool. For those that still don't know IGEL, though, just take one step back. Because I remember running into, I think it was Jeff Kahlberg. He's from Cincinnati. I'm from Cincinnati too.
Yep, good old Jeff.
Ran into that guy a couple years ago, probably a world event of some kind, and he's chucking these little USB drives at everyone, saying, "You got to try this. You got to try this." I said, "Jeff, what are you talking about? Like, what do I got to try?
Right.
What are you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, we got the IGEL in here. You put it in. You got your desktop. You're ready to go." For people that use you, for your customers, they know you intimately and they know everything about you. We've talked a lot about you recently through some of our work with LG and IGEL. Okay. And actually, that piece is still, we did that a number of weeks ago. It's still a top 10 article on our site. We can get into the partnerships, but reset on IGEL, who you are.
Yeah, so for me, this has been a 5-year journey, but this is actually the 20th year of this company. I joined in 2016. I think at that time, other than the Jeff Kahlbergs of the world, there was very few people in enterprise IT that actually knew IGEL. If they did know them, they were probably in the end user compute little bubble, and they would know them as a German thin client company.
Right.
So I've been on this remarkable journey over the last 5 years where when I joined, I had a lot of people told me, don't go there, right? Because it's a hardware company. It's in VDI. This is in 2016 when Elliott was in Citrix, and it's a German company. And how many German tech companies do you know that make it in the U.S.? Very few, right? Other than maybe SAP, you'd be hard pressed to tell me. Germans are great at engineering cars and a lot of other things, but bringing tech into the U.S. has it's not been done to a great extent. And so I saw that as a huge opportunity. And I did a lot of research. I'd been in end user compute for 20 years, and what I saw was there was this IP of this Linux operating system that was sort of trapped on this commoditized, what some people call a dumb terminal or thin client. And what they had actually done, and they'd done this in 2011, they figured out how to take that operating system off the thin client and resurface other x86 hardware. And they didn't really know what to do with it, though. They had some customer in Australia, of all places, that told them, hey, it would be cool if you could do this. So they went back, and took them a couple years. They productized it, but they didn't have any real customers. And so I found out about what they were doing, and I saw the IP, and I was like, this is something very valuable. And that was the beginning of 2016. We put the message in English. We aimed it at the enterprise in the US. We started to partner really aggressively with Citrix and VMware. And Microsoft and Amazon came later. But we basically have a thesis that says, if you're going to have a cloud-delivered workspace or cloud-delivered applications, you really don't need this heavy operating system on the edge, right? You need sort of a purpose-built, light, secure, highly tuned operating system. And Linux, as we all know, is one basically every other vector of IT in terms of operating systems, supercomputers, web traffic, phones. I mean, pretty much anywhere you have a compute device, it's running Linux predominantly, right? And so the desktop is really the only place where Linux hasn't taken over. And we see this.
That's nerd territory, though.
Yeah, we see this architectural shift, though, where you're basically, it may be you need to be a hacker or somebody that's a real gearhead to run Linux on your desktop. The market share of Linux as a standalone desktop is like 1%. But this is the beauty of what we're trying to do. We're not trying to tell people to install applications and run locally. We're basically saying this operating system can be invisible. The average worker that's now highly distributed somewhere in their house that gets a device, plugs it in, puts in their email address, and launch it from there. It launches immediately into their.
Well, that's the simplicity message, and I want to talk about that a little bit too. But just from the experience, like. You came in at a time where VDI was maybe about as boring and as vanilla as it could be, not to be disrespectful.
Yeah, it was under siege. I mean, we were literally trying. I sold a company that was called AppSense. We sold them to Landesk. And literally, we kind of reoriented the message of this company that was neck deep in VDI. It was user profile as a security solution. There was one little thing that we did that helped manage application settings. And so VDI was sort of like slow growth, very small use cases. Yeah. So
not the sexiest part of enterprise IT.
And that was part of why a lot of people told me, go work for Splunk or go work for Palo Alto or some I was in Silicon Valley, so it was like this could be career limiting for you. But I can tell you, we have a slide in the deck today where I talk about my journey. The revenue triple digit in 5 years, the seat count triple digit, and probably the most remarkable thing when I set out to do this, it was like, hey. We're going to go from number 7 in US to number 3 behind HP and Dell. That was sort of the go from obscure to sitting right behind these two guys. And they were kind of our, we had to figure out how to compete against the big guys. And what's interesting is now we have these guys at our doorstep, right? They're licensing our technology. And so what was a competitive relationship has now turned into fuel as they realize, hey, this Linux operating system, just like we put Microsoft on some of our devices, we can factory load this. And so, and of course, part of what has convinced them is a lot of commercial success with customers basically saying, I need IGEL on this. The largest retailers and largest hospitals have basically been forcing them to do it. And then they realize, oh, this is actually pretty good stuff.
Well, so they're also your partners, though, right? Because while you do have some thin clients, HP, I mean, they sell the heck out of those T series.
Yep.
And I think you guys just certified a couple more HP systems in your
Yep.
latest update. So talk about that relationship, about your go-to-market, because you started, I think, very much guerrilla. I mean, and you've got some aspirations that are not unsimilar to maybe Veeam is a close parallel from the software world,
Yep.
where those guys always wanted to be $1 billion company. Like that was the target. I think you've said something along similar lines. You've got big goals.
We were acquired by TA this year. In March, which I just can't believe it was this year to say that. I think the timelines from COVID is sort of strange. But yeah, so we were acquired by TA. They're a 50-year-old, private equity, growth-oriented Silicon Valley company with a lot of sort of IQ on helping companies, that are in the size IGEL is. We're right at this sort of sweet spot, which is, rare air for a lot of software companies to never reach 100 million in software revenue. So that's kind of where we're at. And we think there's a generational shift underway, and COVID has accelerated it, where it's sort of cloud first, mobile first, security first, and there's an opportunity, especially with the generation that's coming into the workforce that just had to spend the last 2 years behind Chromebooks in most cases. They're sort of tuned to this cloud delivered architecture. As you and I grew up, it was sort of like, hey, get your new shiny object every 3 years, with a big, complex, hard to secure, hard to manage operating system on a new hardware device. So a big part of the IGEL
It was
message,
mostly do it your own too,
right.
Because I remember in college, like we used to buy math code processors and chunk them into our systems.
Right.
Like, what is that? It's insane to even think about. I mean, people don't change, even system enthusiasts like gamers, they don't change CPUs. I mean, they will when they get to a new board and there's a new tech or a new Ryzen, whatever. But like the tinkering doesn't seem to be a thing anymore.
No, I mean, kids these days, it's amazing to me. They don't know how a computer works. They don't care. They don't know how a car works. I have 4 kids.
Well, no, but you get it down to like this MacBook Air at $899
right.
with a power button, and it just you type in your email and it just connects with all your Apple stuff, and you're good to go. Your analog is not so different though at IGEL with a similar ease of use message, right?
IGEL should almost be invisible, right? You're going to see here at the show today a demo where we basically unbox a device that's got IGEL on it. Someone types in their email address, they type in their password, and it literally takes them right into their Citrix or Microsoft Windows 365 desktop, right? Like the whole underlying IGEL OS and multiple screens and all the kind of like confusing things of VDI of the past, where you got multiple login screens and it takes a really long time.
Well, that's why people hated VDI.
Yeah.
Was that the devices? Because the thin clients, I mean, there were some mobile thin clients years ago, but not many.
Right.
And persistence obviously was a problem. Then there was a performance challenge. So what if I need to run SolidWorks or something
right.
like that, right? Where it's a GPU-enabled workload. That was a challenge for a while. But a lot of these things are getting worked out. And now the whole desktop delivery mechanism is entirely different.
Exactly. I think the DAS solutions that have been introduced by Microsoft in the last 2 years, what was Windows Virtual Desktop, now Azure Virtual Desktop, that's taken off. I mean, the amount of seats they have running, I was in Redmond a couple of weeks ago, it's astonishing. And then now Windows 365, further abstracting the complexity and management and truly creating an as-a-service model. Because I think when you looked at VDI, it was the 3 C's. It was complexity, it was cost, and it was connectivity. I think we still have some challenges on certain use cases that really highly mobile power users that may be disconnected. But I can tell you there's some cool stuff in the works. I think you'll see in the next 6 months around the disconnected works. It's sort of like you can work in a VM, and then when you get back online, that syncs back up. So I think you're going to see some people really working hard to solve that problem too.
So you're talking about some of the cloud delivered desktops, and at that point you're consuming applications. You're not running an operating system exactly as an end user, right? It's a little more, give me my tools to work, my email, my Word, PowerPoint, whatever it is that you're being provisioned, and a lot less of oh, I booted this, I gotta run system updates, I gotta run all the Windows updates or whatever, right? It's kind of a different mentality.
I mean, we still have updates, obviously, as
Sure.
we stay in sync, and that's one of the values that I think everyone in the industry is seeing around IGEL is we have these really tight integrations with Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, Amazon, and all this ecosystem that needs to work around it. Namely, right now, all the collaboration technologies. So think about WebEx, Teams, Zoom, and the speed at which this stuff is being sort of agile development, right?
Well, yeah, so talk about that, because you guys just had a release a couple weeks ago in September that hit some of the new systems from a validation standpoint,
Yeah.
but also a lot of these web services where you either enhanced or added support there. So what does that do to your development? How fast do you guys have to spin new releases?
Yeah, and I think this is where IGEL's winning, right? Because in the world of Linux operating systems for cloud workspaces, there's very few players that have accomplished what we have. Certainly being able to transfer the OS to other devices and making that work. But the real magic is staying in sync with these technologies, right? So if you're managing 20,000 Citrix seats, and you need to apply the latest Citrix upgrade to be, everybody doesn't want to be the next SolarWinds or whatever, right? So they're trying to stay compliant and stay updated.
So you're seeing
if
pretty
the
rapid
OS
adoption.
if the OS gets out of sync, then literally they can't I guess the OS is like the foundational building block, right? So you need these two things have to talk to each other, right? With the protocol. So if it's out of sync, a lot of bad things can happen. And so we've really prided ourselves on being day zero with a lot of this. Citrix is still our largest install base, so making sure that when they release something, our customers are able to take advantage of those features immediately, and we're in lockstep.
So if we go back to Jeff handing out USB drives, I know you still have that product, to cloud delivery today, obviously COVID accelerated the work from home thing, right? 2 years ago almost.
Yeah.
You guys were well positioned for that, but the cloud adoption for desktop delivery really took off as part of that too. So talk a little bit about maybe how you guys think about end user computing at a higher level. So I was talking before about call centers, but you've got physicians' offices, you've got remote workforces, you've got all these different segments. How do you guys slice those up in your mind?
So our customer segmentation today is definitely the enterprise, people that really care about security, and they really care about performance, and they need to be able to manage a highly distributed footprint. And then the places where we still see the most adoption are in healthcare. That's probably our number one vertical today.
Well, yeah, you were just at HIMSS a couple weeks ago, right?
Yes, exactly. So healthcare, is just it's something we've solved with Imprivata and Epic and Cerner, and they're in a highly virtualized, highly regulated, and also highly sort of mobile in terms of clinician and workstations on
scanning
wheels
in with their HID card and having, in that instant, right? They're signing in and they've got to have their iteration of controls.
And it can be life or death, right? In terms of those things working and being really working well with Citrix, like we just talked about, or working with Imprivata. And there's a lot of little nuances that have to be tuned in order for that experience to be really world class. And so that's really where we one of the things that IGEL has done that's so beautiful is that we've actually gone in on a lot of this older hardware that just sort of all of a sudden the doctor's like, this is really slow and it's not working right. And they think, okay, we got to throw that. It's the age-old hamster wheel of hardware. We've got to throw this hardware away. And so one of the beauties of IGEL is we've intersected a lot of that. This needs to be replaced and resurfaced it. And you just breathe new life into this stuff through the software. So the other verticals are financial services, a lot of banks that are in distributed models and people working from home and dealing with secure information. A lot of call centers in the insurances space where they're working from home forever now. We also are doing, real well in government. A lot of those people never worked from home before, so that's been interesting.
So for all these
And retail, that's the other one. Retail is the other big one for us.
Running like POS and stuff like that at the sort of retail edge.
So next time you go into like a sunglasses hut, those are all being run by IGEL.
In Ohio, it's shady. It's cloudy all the time. We don't.
You don't have sunglasses.
We don't have sun. So.
But yeah, the lens crafters, Provision, this Luxottica kind of monopoly of everybody's wearing glasses. I'm sure you have a pair there. That's probably came from Luxottica.
Sadly, my readers. I had LASIK 10 years ago, and now
it's worn
close stuff's starting to fail. So it comes with age.
They're a long-time customer. They're actually one of the first IGEL customers in the U.S.
They're in Cincinnati.
Yeah, exactly. That's Jeff sold them.
Yeah.
And so they're doing a refresh right now, but they literally have over 30. I think it's actually close to 40,000 devices now, managed by one guy in Cincinnati, and that's like an unheard of ratio, obviously, with endpoints. And these are devices that are mission critical. They're actually connected to the cash register.
All right. So you said you covered a bunch of ground there, and there's two things I wanted to get back to. First is the hardware.
Yep.
So in days past, you hire a new employee, you hand them a Latitude or whatever. They've got to sign in for Windows, and it's kind of like, there you go. You might have some apps on there. It feels like even in the enterprise for those knowledge workers, so the task workers, the call center guys could always get by on VDI, and it was largely fine. But now you're pushing more into a power user. You talked about the financial trade where they might want the security of a thin client delivery, but still need things like 4K monitors for trading algorithms or whatever. What's going on with the hardware side, and how has that changed from handing a new employee a laptop to what's happening today? So if I hire a new person today that's remote, how does that work?
I mean, we're seeing more and more mobile form factors here at this show. You'll see, HP, Lenovo, LG. They're all basically building these sort of $600 to $800 beautiful form factors, nice. Very light and great screen. So multiple steps above a Chromebook, if you will, right? And so, we're basically seeing that use case with an IGEL operating system on it, and then connect to Citrix, connect to whatever they need to connect to. I mean, what's interesting is you have a beautiful laptop sitting here, and my guess is you have very little things staved on that locally, and you have very few local apps even, right? You're getting a lot. So this is the irony of a lot of people today. They have this $2,000 laptop, yet they're really getting all their data and their applications for the most part are coming from the cloud. So
it's all in Google Drive or whatever, or 365, whatever. Because we've learned anything as end users is that this system will fail.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we see in Windows devices specifically, this is where I get really excited, because you walk into I was with a guy that's running a hospital that has 11,000 Windows devices, and you start asking him, well, how many agents do you have on those devices? And he's like, well, we got Tanium and Symantec. I mean, we have it's defense in depth, kind of like, okay, we're going to try to stack all this stuff up on there. And the beauty of IGEL is it's read only. You get it down to a very small footprint of just the stuff that you need to sit under the things that you are delivering. And it's a remarkable sort of security story. I mean, we've come to the rescue of some very large companies, which of course we can't talk about here, but that's the challenge with getting the IGEL story out there.
Solving problems like that can be embarrassing, right?
Yeah, when we've had National Guard involved and FBI involved in some of the big ransomware situations that we've got involved in. The NHS over in the UK, they got hit by ransomware. A lot of hospitals been compromised, which is
small ones especially, and they've got no infrastructure or staff to be able to recover from these things.
Exactly. So University of Vermont Medical is one that we worked with. We can talk about the ones that are more public, and that was one where I think everyone was looking around and going, they would just started deploying IGEL, so they only had a few hundred devices out, and they go, why are these still working? It was a very interesting moment where they were like, okay, we need to accelerate this 8,000 seat deployment we had there.
Right.
But I think this is right now in the White House. There's a 2-day summit. They didn't invite the Russians or the Chinese, but there's a lot of other countries sitting in Washington right now talking about ransomware and I think it's nearly 200% increase in attacks.
Well, everyone's talking about it in the data center world where we spend most of our time. Every IT vendors talking about it.
Right.
All the backup guys are talking about immutable backups. How do you do this? How do you move your backup somewhere and then silo that thing so you can't touch it and can't modify it, more importantly?
That's kind of like our story on the actual endpoint, right? Because it's a read-only piece of firmware. There's checksums. When the device boots, it just, like, if anything's compromised, it just doesn't even run.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's our security story is probably untold in a lot of ways, right? In terms of people really understanding how hardened it can be, and how also you can how it can dance with the applications and contextually, also adjust things based on posture, where somebody's sitting or what their role is. So there's a lot you can do. I think one of the things that we probably don't talk enough about is we talk about this great piece of invisible operating system that's really secure and highly tuned. There's also a second piece of technology that comes with every IGEL license, and that's the Universal Management Suite, which is this control center for 7,000 different control points on that device that's running IGEL, and it's all policy based. Very easy to write a policy, save it, drag it into a folder. It looks a lot like Active Directory, right? You dream up a policy that you
all
want.
Field sales guys or whatever.
Yeah, all the guys in Dallas need to have this browser that can only go to these places. Okay, boom. All of a sudden, all those devices are adjusted without even restarting the device.
Right, and so that's for existing, but if you're onboarding people quickly too, having those profiles associated with their job descriptions or whatever.
Or the store profile. This is why Luxottica can get away with one guy. I actually had dinner last night with Fleet Farms. They're probably, many of your listeners probably don't know who they are. I didn't know who they were from California, but there's this big, interesting farming store in the Midwest and Minneapolis and Wisconsin. But
like a Tractor Supply kind of alternative. Okay.
They love IGEL, and they use them for running the store. And he says, like, when we open new stores, it's the provisioning is plug and play because it's all policy based.
Well, I mean, when you're talking retail too, there's no IT guy in there. If you go to even a Walmart, big store, Kroger, another one in Cincinnati, 100,000 square foot plus stores, and they even have little data centers in them, many of them do, to run this stuff locally. But even that brings with it some risk. So if you're going to throw servers and storage or some hyperconverged something in there, now you've got to physically protect it so that disks don't go walking off. So now you've got a cage, we've got access controls. And I guess they worry a little bit more from a POS standpoint of, if I'm using a cloud-based thing, what happens when I lose power or lose the internet?
Right.
So now how do you start to help these organizations architect around those things from a resiliency standpoint?
So what I would tell you is we really lean on our resellers at that point, right? To find the right solutions there. This is part of the ecosystem that's so wonderful, right? We play this nice little part in the underlying operating system. So that's a great question. I actually not sure how like a Luxottica deals with an offline if they go offline.
Right.
I think part of what they're doing is building a lot of resiliency into the multiple routes to they have sort of backup satellite or multiple different ways to connect in case one goes down. They have the other one.
Well, everyone's been. I was. To look good for you, I went and got a haircut yesterday before I came down here.
You didn't get one at it looked like a really nice old-time barber shop.
I know, I saw that downstairs, the one-seat guy. Oh, man, I didn't shave either. I might have to hit that guy on the way out. But I was going to pay, and it's like, our system's down. Use the other. So you have to have the resiliency to keep going. You were talking about your partners, and we started talking about mobile thin clients and how cool those are. Yep. I told you at the beginning the work we were doing with LG. Those all-in-ones they've got going now are insane.
Yes.
So if you talk about onboarding a new employee, for instance, I don't know how many jobs I had long ago where day one you get this awful laptop that weighs 12 pounds. Is normally 3 to 5 years old, so it already sucks in terms of running XP or whatever we were running back then. And the user experience is miserable. Apps are slow, it crashes, you've got to maintain Windows, you've got to do all this stuff. Just compare that to dropping off this 34-inch curved all-in-one from LG throw that on your desk at home. I mean, it's worlds different.
It's
And those
amazing.
aren't even that expensive.
Yeah, no, these
They're
guys have
insane.
really listened. I mean, the one thing about the Koreans is they really love to innovate on design,
Yeah.
and they listen to their customers, and they really try to understand what they're doing with the devices, and yeah, they're not afraid to like get the some prototypes out there, and yeah, we've been working with LG now for almost 5 years, and it's been a very rewarding journey with them. We're now selling tens of thousands of devices. We just put I think close to 20,000 of those curved all-in-ones into University of Washington Medical. And I think just in terms of people used to worry about all-in-one, the screen's going to die, and what's going to happen with the machine.
Who cares? They're so inexpensive.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
They are beautiful.
And the space that saved, and the wires, and the one they have that we're selling to the hospital has the built-in RFI reader, so they can tap right into it.
Yeah, well, they've got that the white 24-inch one too.
Yeah.
That's
Hospital
that you
grade.
can clean and
Yeah.
everything and keep it up. But yeah, I mean, but when you think about what you have to support from an end user systems perspective, so you've got a couple you just keep in the closet somewhere. If that one breaks or gets hit by a hammer or whatever,
Exactly.
yank it down, throw the new one in, and because you're already set up, you just
We
credential
did this
into
with
that thing.
Strayer. That they bought into that exact. You maybe know Strayer University, the
Yeah.
largest private university out there, and they bought into this idea of let's just have a depot, and if they fail, we'll just hot ship them out a new one, and
Yeah.
off they go. So yeah, the all-in-one concept, I think, as we think about hoteling and working from home, and how do we get people the right equipment to do their job effectively and happily, these types of form factors, I think, are gonna enter into the equation for the right user
Sure.
use case that's at home. This is a game changer, and they go up and down, and the thing, I mean, I saw you can connect 2 other 4K monitors to that.
Yeah.
So there's
start daisy chaining.
Yeah,
those
you
things.
really. It's remarkable the amount of technology. I back to the days of when you and I started, right? It was like I was on site at Cisco when they were early on selling them all their tech, and the monitors were these Sony monitors that were the length of this table, right? They were
Right.
CRT, and
Right.
they were also doubled as heaters.
Mm-hmm. No
So
doubt.
yeah, we've come a long way in this the screens.
Yeah, like I said, those LG systems are amazing. The new portables are really cool, and I think it's changing the way that end users, and I guess end users in an org probably don't even know you're there, honestly, right? Because they log in, they don't really.
No, if it's
interact with
deployed
IGEL.
correctly, they don't even know. The one other thing I would tell you on the LG front that I really think is amazing is they're building the docking station into their some of their monitors now. So it's just an RJ45. You just
Yeah.
plug that in, and you literally have a camera and a beautiful monitor and the keyboard and the mouse. So when you start thinking about hoteling, where people as we started this conversation, they are going to want to come back to the office.
Yeah.
Even though people are saying stay home forever, I think you'll find
That's not going to work.
there's a portion of the humans are wired to be around each other. The campfire mentality is going to kick in at some point where they're going to want to see and interact with other humans. And I think that we'll also see, at least my career, my 25 years, I've always found the greatest speed and collaboration comes when you actually are in a room with people and aligning and ideating. And
Yeah, you have to. I mean, their emails and Zoom can only go so far, but you did make one just sort of flyby comment on the LGs. They've got the camera guy integrated in, and for all these Zoom and Google Meet and all the conferencing things, what have you guys had to do? Because I know that's been a big focus on the software side. What's your responsibility there as IGEL to enable those technologies?
so it's a lot, actually, right? We're working with the codecs. We're working with Zoom, with
I assume they're all a
Teams.
little different too.
Yeah,
which
they
is
all
gotta
are
be
very
super
different.
annoying.
I think there's there's some commonality between all of them, but they all require a little bit of special attention. So we were actually very early with Zoom. So well before they became a household name, we had been working on them. Given that we were headquartered in San Francisco, we were adopting it internal at IGEL.
Right.
So we were like, we need to make sure this works good for our own people. And so we were tracking them down. Of course, they went crazy. And then Teams, the relationship with Microsoft has really helped us make sure that the Teams works well. because that is the table stakes right now. You cannot deploy this technology if you can't make collaboration work.
And why is that specifically so hard? Is it just the weightiness of audio video that makes it hard?
Yeah, well, it's really the dance between the processing of the in the data center and being able to use the the hardware that's actually on the device. And this is some of the magic of IGEL, right? Is that we're using the processor on the device to make sure that the audio and there's no hiccups in that. And so some of the logic that our wonderful developers in Germany have been able to do, right, in terms of threading the needle and using the processing power that's local with the protocol that's coming across. There's a lot of hard work in the last 20 months that have made this a lot more acceptable. Because I would tell you, at the beginning of COVID, there were some, especially as everybody ran home and these solutions got sort of saturated. There was the people that didn't deploy this stuff correctly got in a lot of trouble.
They got
and on multiple fronts, whether it was security, but also collaboration just became, we spent a lot of time. Citrix Teams, Citrix Zoom, Citrix WebEx, right? And then of course the other thing where we get a lot of involvement is the actual headsets, right? Because a lot of this stuff is being used where you want, in a call center, you need this headset to actually work.
Right.
So this is where I think IGEL separates ourselves, not only just out of the box, but also you still have to tune this stuff, right? It's like it's a little bit of an art that you still have to you got to get it tuned correctly, and then once you get it set, you have this beautiful leverage you get over any other solution out there, right? With the amount of maintenance that you're gonna, the number of people that it's going to be required to patch and update it just goes way down.
So that's an interesting point, and you talked about POS as a good vector for you guys in terms of devices out there and solving that problem in retail. It feels like these devices now are powerful enough and easy enough to use and deploy that they could capture some spots where maybe IoT gateways used to play, other edge servers, edge virtualization. Are you guys sort of nibbling away at some of these other non-traditional desktop use cases?
We have some interesting things we're working on with Honeywell, where they have some kind of use cases that are our typical VDI
more industrial
use cases,
something.
exactly. And we are seeing kiosks pop up and time card machines and some things where you're just like anywhere where Windows is.
Well, right, that would
managed.
normally be a PC,
right,
that has to be managed and all of that sort
exactly.
of thing that comes with it.
A lot of we're also seeing it in conference centers or conference rooms, where interesting use cases around testing, both remote testing and labs and universities, where you have this need to like sort of reset them and set them up with certain profiles,
right,
in mass. So that's been a use case, but we haven't gone all the way to IoT yet, because really it's just a different channel, it's a different packaging, it's a different pricing. It's
and you might need a more ruggedized device or something, but it doesn't seem like it's that far away.
It isn't. I guess part of what we're looking at with kind of the addressable market, there's at least 30 million people using VDI today, and that number could, some people will tell you it's 100 million, right? And certainly with Microsoft, if you go talk to the guys in Redmond, they're like infinity and beyond in terms of like where they could go with this, right? I mean, there's probably 500 million people running Windows devices out there in the world, right? So the opportunity for IGEL, where we're just we're scratching the surface, it's selling 750,000 licenses a year or whatever, right? So we have an opportunity to kind of, once we get into the millions of licenses a year, I think that's where it gets really interesting, because we're gonna kind of go past the entire thin client market. That's my goal, right? As a leader of this company, one of my aspirations is there's about 5 million thin clients sold a year between all the different players. I would like to see IGEL surpass the entire thin OS market And that's totally doable as we make this sort of architectural change. Because just I think what you're going to see is fat clients will be loaded with a thin OS. The old fat client,
Right.
that we would consider the primary use case for a knowledge worker or task worker, could be replaced with a thin operating system.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I mean, you talked about the one guy to 40,000 endpoints at Luxottica. The other thing I think is really interesting here is not just the deployment. Obviously, that gets really easy. Devices have gotten better. But from a support standpoint, you can do like shadowing, you can do remote reboot, you can do a lot of service stuff that traditionally would require an on-site person.
Or another tool also, right? Like a lot of people have some of that functionality, but they're paying for
another license for something
with some
else.
other tool, right? So that is, one of the magical things.
Well, that's another security issue too, right?
Right.
I mean, you could use whatever, TeamViewer or something, but now it's another thing to manage.
Right.
So how much has that helped in this newly distributed enterprise from a support and service standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the real big IGEL benefits is just the amount of touch that's required. And we're here actually today to talk about our OS 12. One of the benefits of TA buying us is we now have this really smart board that's been assembled. The executive chairman of our board is a guy named Bill Beck.
You're the CEO. Of course, you're going to say the board's great.
They're great, yeah, exactly. Bill is a legendary guy around OSs, right? When you think about Microsoft and all the different versions of the OS, his fingerprints were on OS 7 or Windows 7, right? Which everybody probably would agree. In the enterprise, this was the most stable.
Big step. Yeah.
It was a great version of Windows, and so he was at Microsoft doing that when he was like a peer to Satya at this time. He was also at HP when they broke it in two. So he's a really smart operator and a great product builder. So he's challenging us to sort of build this next version of our operating system that makes it even easier to update, even faster to onboard, and just more elegant, less Linuxy, right? Like a little bit more of an
softer,
HTML5 kind of web front end, and the console that was also a little bit Linuxy 1990s is going to have a facelift. It'll be all web orientated. You can be sitting at home and looking at your devices on a mobile device and be able to do all the things that you used to have to sit behind a Java console to run it. So this is a step forward. It's going to be next year, and I think it'll really keep IGEL way out ahead of everybody. And a big piece of it though is the updates. So we're building like an app store service, so you can build your own apps that you can put on the IGEL device, and we'll have the certified apps as well. So like the Citrix and VMware and Zoom and whatever. So those they'll live there, and it'll just be a lot easier. Instead of it being a monolithic piece of firmware, it'll be much more easy to update without having to update the entire piece of firmware.
So speaking of updates and a more modern desktop management system, we also have, of course, we've talked about it a couple times, the cloud deployment model. Obviously, Microsoft's all in on that, right? Because that's a big growth area for them. But Amazon's made a big investment too in desktop delivery. What do you see looking for organizations that want to embrace VDI? We see a lot of dedicated silos of IT on-prem now. Do you see that going away? Do you see a hybrid model, or does cloud take over? Like what do you think?
I'd definitely say hybrid, and I think part of the IGEL story around this is choice. I mean, we have a huge hospital up in Chicago where I just was, Advocate Aurora. They merged. They have such a heterogeneous environment, right? They have some VMware, they have some Citrix, they have HP devices, they have Dell devices. So the magic of IGEL is, look, we can resurface all these devices. We can, kind of help you as you find your way. And some of these guys are going to have multiple delivery solutions that can come to the same device, right? And we can do that at a flip of this, the policy on that device. So in a world that's hybrid, a world that's heterogeneous, IGEL can do very well. We haven't talked a lot about one thing that's really near and dear to me also is that these devices, right, and this 3-year refresh, or even with thin clients, 5-year refresh, and these devices that you talked about before, where you're like, we got to throw this thing away because it runs slow.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most amazing things that has shocked me is just taking those old devices and putting iGel on them, and then connecting them to Citrix, and just all of a sudden they're running Windows 10 or Windows 11 even now.
I know.
On a device that is literally 8 years old, and it has plenty of processor for running our operating system and consuming this solutions out of.
Well, that's the thing. Like, there's still so many hardware resources in these machines, but they just get kind of.
Well, they're not. Yeah, they're just not set up to run the size of Windows 10 or Windows 11. It just can't.
Right, but you're still able to deploy Windows 11 via your OS, which is crazy.
Yeah, and so I think this is something that's important to me, and I'll talk about this in my keynote today, is that the world is throwing away 55 million tons of e-waste, right? And it's insane when you really think about it. Yeah, and so I think every organization is going to have to, they're going to all start thinking about climate change and their, position there, and I think employees are going to really be pushing this as well, right? We all want our kids to be able to drink the water and just have clean air, and so I think one of the things that iGel brings to the table is this sort of like ability to carbon neutral a device. We're working with an environmental auditing firm right now, so that when you buy a Workspace Edition license and you're putting it on an older device, you get a carbon credit to neutralize that device, right? And for companies that are in, United's a big customer of ours, right? So like as they have these initiatives to be carbon neutral, that carbon credit is actually very valuable to them, right? And so I would challenge you that, and the audience, that over the next 3 to 5 years, every organization is going to have some kind of initiative around this, and this is where I think iGel really shines, right? It's the auditing firm we're working with is looking at it going, wow, we give carbon credits for this recycle program,
right?
But if you remember the 3 R's of reduce is the first one, reuse is the second one, recycle is the third one. We're really in the reuse category.
You're absolutely right, though. I mean, the thin clients that are out there now aren't super powerful. It's just that you've optimized the delivery of the pixels to these displays, right, over the line or whatever. So even CPUs and laptops that are a couple years old still have the capability if they were delivered in optimized software experience.
Right, and that goes full circle back to when I joined iGel and I realized, well, this operating system is extensible to other devices, and this is the irony of the whole conundrum we sit in, right? Because the other Linux operating systems for this type of technology are actually built by the hardware guys, right? So it's almost not in their interest to enable an extension of life, right? They're really tuned to keeping the factory and the refresh going. So it's
renew the license and sell another set of gear, right?
Exactly. So this has been, that I think for me as a kid who grew up in Northern California and around the sort of back to land hippies, and I love when we find customers that are like, whoa, I can run this on this pallet that I had headed to the landfill of devices. We intercepted earlier this year 12,500 devices that were like literally
on their way
out, and it was like they were just like, this is crazy, we can run this on these devices.
Sure.
And the manufacturer told us that this was impossible.
Not incentivized. So, but I understand you've got a lot of partners. You got to be careful.
So you got to be careful with that. But it is. I just feel like that's the existential crisis of our time, right?
Hey, no, look, if you can find a place where you can leverage that and take that message and show orgs how to do this without sending them off to recycle. Let's see if we can put them to work. Or even if you can't, how can we put them to work for low-income school districts?
Exactly.
How do we get that stuff back? And we've done a lot of that too. So we've got a big lab in Cincinnati, and we've got all this gear that comes in all the time, and we are always looking. I can't remember the last time we threw something away or really recycled it. We get it to schools. We donate it to high schools, to colleges. We gave Ohio State University Genomics Lab a full 2U 24-bay server full of flash because we didn't need it anymore. and they were trying to go sequence genomes faster.
I mean, that's what they say about the world's resources. It's really not a problem with like the amount of resources we have. It's about
where are they?
Where are they? It's
right.
distributing them to the right people.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have some great resellers, CompuGen up in Canada, Zentegra here, that are doing similar things like this, where they're helping get these one man's trash, another man's treasure.
Well, and schools did the same thing. I don't know how it's like out there, but our school district did this whole Chromebook thing, that was so hot and popular because they could get these, I don't know, $450 or $500 Chromebooks, and they put them in, rack them 30 in a little case, and they roll them around, and whatever the kids use them. Mm-hmm. But the kids all are using iPads and iPhones and PCs and Macs that are way better than any of these Chromebooks, and they're being delivered kind of a crappy experience, and they know it's garbage.
Yeah.
But there's better ways to do it and to deliver the secure environment that you want, especially with kids. We've got to restrict, browsing or make sure that they're protected.
I mean, I just think the one thing that's the gift of that architecture for those kids is that they're exposed to like, hey, cloud delivered. I mean, they've been using it. Maybe it's not as great as it could be, but it's they're getting their email through a browser, right? They're not used to you and I, like we grew up on Exchange,
right?
Big fat client, locally installed.
I had Lotus Notes for a while,
right? And so I just feel like this is going to lend itself to like, as these people literally, like it happens faster than you imagine, right? They're going to be the decision makers in IT before you can turn around here. So I think this is going to lend itself to this, what we believe is an architectural shift in how devices and endpoints look, right? It's just going to be altogether lighter, and that compute is going to live somewhere else. It's just safer and faster and more
cost
mobile
effective too.
Exactly.
Well, look, I know you're minutes away from going down and delivering your keynote today, so I should probably let you go. One last thing though, I know you guys have a trial. I think you even just extended the time that you're making these things available. How, if someone wants to engage with IGEL, what's the best place to start?
So we have an awesome team around Europe and in the US, but the website actually has the ability to download that was one of the fun things I figured out. Yeah, you can download it. You get a free trial for 90 days, and it's got all the full-blown operating system with all the codecs. And I would say around the United States, if they download it, we'll hopefully reach right out to you, or you can raise your hand. And we have some very great engineers around the country that will interact. That's one of the special gifts of IGELs. We're still small enough, and we still really care. And we're, like we said at the beginning of this, we're starting to get back out with customers. And actually usually it's a sort of show me how this would work. So we do a lot of proof of concepts. We have a great community though. The other thing I would say is igel.com/community. It's 7,000 people on Slack, essentially talking about this, technology.
Supporting each other too.
It's crazy. Like we sell paid support. You can get an answer on our community in 8 minutes on average or less. And so one thing I think that's been unique for me in my 5-year journey here is just the ecosystem and the sort of religion. And it's like once people get this and they understand it, they just get fanatical about it.
Right.
We have some people that just around the world that just have become evangelists for the technology.
But it's so funny, like they're the evangelists, but all these thousands of end users have no idea.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's the beauty of IGEL in a lot of ways. They don't know that it's the hedgehog powering their device.
Yeah.
They think they're just getting a Windows desktop, which is exactly how we want it to be. If we're successful, Brian,
they should never know.
Yeah, we'll be on millions and millions of devices, new devices every year, and no one will know IGEL's even there. And this is, I think, the demo that we'll show here, and I'm sure people will see it soon enough. But it's just, put your email in, put your multi-factor in, go to the place that you need, and that literally can happen in 1 minute and 30 seconds with a device that's brand new, and it's going to have Brian's profile on it, with all the things you need.
Good. Well, this is awesome. You better get downstairs. I don't even have a badge yet. Thanks for your time.
Me either.
Let's go.
Yeah. Well,
thanks for tuning in, everyone. Bye-bye.